Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming to our talk this evening. We have a really wonderful evening lined up with you with very interesting speakers and topics. So first of all, I'd introduce myself. My name is Michelle Teague and I'm based at RMIT University in Vietnam. And I would like to also introduce Chung from Hanoi Ad Hoc, just to briefly talk about Hanoi Ad Hoc and what we do. And then I'll introduce the speakers to you for this evening. Chung.
Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for this conversation today. My name is Chung, an architect and also an initiator of Hanoi Ad Hoc. And as you maybe you already know about the activities of Hanoi Ad Hoc this year. It's about investigate the industrial landscape of the city of Hanoi. And beyond just understanding how the factories shape our urban landscape, we want also to have a broader view or a holistic landscape of the industrial situation in Hanoi by including the craft village industrial, as the SYLVIE said, the rural industrialization that contribute a lot to the process of urbanization, or in more specific in-situ urbanization. So that's why we have the topic of the talk today focus on the craft village. And thank you, SYLVIE, for accepting our invitation. And also today we have Dr. Phạm Tài Sơn and Lê Quỳnh Chi. We're joining the conversation on the craft village, the future, promotion of densification and urbanization in the rural urban area. So I will give the stage to SYLVIE.
Thank you, John. Thank you. So tonight the topic is from cottage industrialization to in-situ urbanization around Hanoi and incomplete urbanization. So our keynote speaker this evening is SYLVIE FANCHETTE, and her background is as a geographer, research director at IRD, the French Institute of Research for Sustainable Development. And her research activity focuses on three issues: the forms and dynamics of subaltern urbanization processes in densely populated Asia, the vulnerability of populations in the densely populated deltas of Asia, the Mekong and Ganges, Brahmaputra and Meghna, and adaptation strategies to the climate change, including environmental migration, urban-rural relations through the prism of migration, and the collection and recycling of urban waste in artisanal clusters. She seeks to demonstrate how the population densification and the economic activities diversification generate an in-situ urbanization process in the countryside that, linked to the high level of hydraulic vulnerability of delta regions, requires particular modes of governance. So from October 2019 to August 2021, she has been invited at the Hanoi Architectural University for participating in the doctoral program, Architecture, City, Territory and Landscape. And she has co-led the Urbanization program, Waste Collection and Recycling in Hanoi, Urban Dynamics and Metropolitan Restructuring, Industry-Led Urbanization Challenges in the Red River Delta Countryside. So please welcome SYLVIE FANCHETTE, and later on we will have discussions with our guests, Dr. Lê Quỳnh Chi and Dr. Phạm Tài Sơn. So welcome, SYLVIE FANCHETTE.
Okay, thank you. So I will share my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chung, for inviting me. Thank you, Micah, for leading this group, and for the two, Sun and Chi, for discussing with me. So today I will present you my presentation on cottage industrialization and in-situ urbanization around Hanoi. So I want to raise the question: why craft villages, cluster of craft villages, which have a very high level, a high urban potential, have not benefited from policies to elevate themselves to city status with urban-like services and infrastructure. So we know that industrialization is one of the most important drivers for urbanization. But in situ urbanization in Vietnam is not considered to be a real urbanization process. So what is industrial-led urbanization? So industrialization is considered as a driver for urbanization because it leads to diversification of rural activities, increased employment, so extra agriculture activities in factories, in services, housing, catering, machine maintenance, all of these services led by an industry. The population density growth is linked to migration because of all the migrant workers who are going to work in the industry. So it's increase the building density, and it generates new social infrastructure. And also industrialization is a driver of urbanization because of the industrialization extend the urban space, because for industrial infrastructure, housing, communication network. So that is the first things. But industrialization also needs a special type of governance adapted to industry because you need more technical services, increased budget, raise taxes over the industry, and also building standards. So all those characteristics will be analyzed through the prism of industrialization led by cluster of craft villages. So I will present the various aspects of craft villages' urban potential. So we have studied in 3 provinces of Hanoi, of Red River Delta, Hanoi, Bac Ninh, and the former Hatay province. And so we have analyzed and locate numerous clusters which offer sometimes several thousand of jobs, which led to the increase of population. So there are a new process of division of labor on space and new space of production like Diem Con Nhep, so like artisanal zone, to delocate the polluting enterprises and enlarge the industrial space for the larger businesses in the craft villages clusters. And also there is a large range of migrant attraction. It can be daily mobility from surrounding village, but also thousands of people coming from other provinces, and most of them are coming from mountainous area where there is no job. So there is a big attraction. It's like a city. Those craft villages are really like city because for their population attraction. And also what is very important to understand that this system is very ancient system of production which is root in villages' value, know-how, and occupation network between the city and the countryside. And you know all that the old quarter of Hanoi was the link between the countryside and the city, and all those villages have been part of the development of the central Hanoi. So it's a very ancient process. So just to to give you some data on those craft villages. So it's an old map which we did in 2006 with a large survey we made, and we use also other type of information from the JICA MAD census. So there are more than 1,000 craft villages in the Red River Delta. According to the definition we give to craft villages, there are more than 1 million there are more than 1 million of full-time and part-time workers. So it's a very a big center for creating jobs. And some of the clusters of craft villages are between 7,000 workers until 25,000, which is enormous. So those craft villages are highly diversified. You've got wicker work, textile embroidery, objet d'art, food processing, metallurgy, construction, and recycling village like papers and plastic. So they are linked to diversified markets, local, domestic, and international. And some of those cluster of craft villages are strongly mechanized. Most of them, the cluster of recycling, plastic, paper, metalwork are highly mechanized and integrated in the international market. So at the level of a cluster, so what we call a cluster of craft villages is composed of several villages grouping, and most of them are working in the same range of activity. Here you've got a map of the donkey wood furniture craft villages in Bac Ninh province. And so each village is specialized in a step of the production. So some of the village supply raw material, some have got special know-how like carving and graving, like in the case of donkey. Some just participate to the cluster by providing land because they have got a lot of land to rent to the large factories. Some villages are specialized in services, transport, trade, market, and workshop for repairing machine, and some supply manpower. So it's like a division of labor, like we have in the cities. So in these craft villages, as in peri-urban areas, there is what I call in-situ urbanization, which is a process linked to residential densification and diversification of the economy. Because there are very high densities, like in cities, like 100 or 200 inhabitants per hectares, and with an increasing process of land price. There is also architectural evolution. You can see from the rural house with the courtyard, with the different buildings, to tube houses like in the cities. And so this densification of the building densification and population is done on ponds, of courtyards, of urban garden. We know that we are in a delta, and in delta there were a lot of water plan, a lot of gardens, and all those places have got a very high land price value for buildings. So more and more there is an elevation, like you can see on the small on this sketch, and how from this rural and peasant house have led to this type of very highly vertical and diversified use of land. So this extension of the building up area has been done legally or illegally, and also on agricultural land. And that was done after Doimoy, because government gave a lot of incentive to the inhabitant to increase the space of living or on producing. So it's a process of urbanization we see in villages, but it's the same thing that we can analyze in cities. So the relationship between the different enterprises at the village level are part of the division of labor in the production space and zoning of activity. And we know that zoning activities in this social spatial system increase the process of urbanization. Zoning is part of a policy to organize the city. So the work is divided between different types of businesses. Each one is responsible of one stage of the production. Here you've got a map of donkey, so the furniture, the wood furniture village, a cluster, and we can see that each type of activity is located in a special area. And here you've got a lot of and this division of labor is done according to the price of land. We can understand that all the trade and the open space to sell furniture are, of course, along the roads where the land is the highest, but where the access is the better. And at the same time, there is a division of labor and of use of place for the services. Here we can see it's one of the road of these villages with a lot of different type of activity, trade, services, like in a city. And so we can see here there is in those craft villages, with the increase of, with the development of the activity and the mechanization of the activity and the need for space, we have a kind of 3-speed production area. In the central part, in the core of the village, you've got a kind of small craft workshop with a very bad condition of production in a very small space, with a small phone, with a small chimney. But we are in the core of village. Here you have got a kind of informal zone it's in the paper village of FANCHETTE in Bac-Ninh. And you have a kind of, it's enlarged space, but with no control of the industry and use of space. And here we have those Diem Kong-Yep, like 15 hectares space, only for production, only for big enterprises. And the process of mechanization is really part of the development of those craft villages. And I say above all for all those recycling villages, metal, paper, and plastic. And it means that those the upgrading of those villages can be done with larger investment, but it needs the space. And those villages attract much more migrants than the one who work without machine. And this type of those craft villages are embedded in a territory. a kind of, I say, territory in motion, because you have a lot of infrastructure which have shaped the space, like the kiln in the pottery village, a pond for soaking bamboo, and also those villages, those artisans use the space of the village. There is a multi-use of space which explain how we can have such a very high density in those villages, but it shows that there is an issue of space. Like here, rice noodles are drying on the land, on the edge of the dike, and we know that dike are space of communication with a lot of environmental issues. It's also, those villages have got a very rich heritage, which can be used as opportunity to develop tourism, to diversify the economy. And also, there are some villages have developed this activity for 1 millennium. I mean, more than 1,000 years, and that is embedded in the territory, and it's anchor the history in this craft territory, and also it's a way for pushing also a young generation to participate by training to the diversification of those activities. But all these factors demonstrate how all that has led to an incomplete urbanization process because of lack of services, housing, and adapted governance. If we address the increase of population linked to migration issue, we can show that because of the specificity of seasonal and temporary migration, because of temporary labor contract for the migrant, informal employment, there is no politics, no policy to support labor. So it means that there is no sustainable housing for those migrants and their family. You can see that they live in very bad condition in Nyacho, like dormitorio, or sometimes in the workshop. They can't invite their family to stay with them, so there is not a process of urbanization by settling population with their family in a space. There is no access to services like school because of Hoc. Those people, they can't get access to services of the village. So there is no possible integration of those migrants to those craft villages for them to become a city. So there is also an incomplete process of urbanization because of the government or the governance to this new economic and demographic context. Here you can see there is a big issue of communication and traffic jam because those villages have got very small and narrow roads, and so it's very difficult for those big lorries to get access to all those small workshops. There are also no policy. I mean, the police belongs to the police, and most of the services belongs to the level of the district and not the village. And at the communal level, there is a lack of means of coercion. I mean, if you just settle if you dump your waste in the street, the fines are very low because we are in a village. And also there is lineage and clientelist relations within the village. So a lot of conflictual relationship and laissez-faire. So that is, it's a big issue, and also the inequality to access to land in the new industrial areas. So why is this impossible urbanization? Because the scale of state intervention is incompatible with those of industrial space and actor. There are no community of communes of cities that can create new administrative units covering the craft clusters. We can see here in this map, it's the donkey cluster, and we can see that this cluster overlap the administrative division. Some communes belongs to several districts, and even we are here on a cluster which overlap the Bac Ninh province and Hanoi province. So as the Vietnamese administration is very hierarchical, each administration level have got a specific policy. So there is no policy at the level cluster which could recognize the entity, the production entity, because it's not an administration level. There is no association for grouping the craft people. And when you've got industrial zone, it's an industrial, a Diem Công Nghiệp, it's just at a level of a village. It's only at village or a commune, and there is no policy over several communes. It's not possible for the administrative system in Vietnam. So the issue of land is very important in the context of metropolization and the competition with top-down metropolization. It means that the land, there are a big competition between the village. Here you've got the La Phu village, and around all their agricultural land have been expropriated for large projects, Khu de Thi Mai or Kum Công Nghiệp. So it means that there are very limited land reserve for the village and the cluster of craft villages, because the government give priority to the process of urbanization through Khu de Thi Mai. And so the agricultural land is expropriated, and the people, because the land belongs to the state, and the peasants are only users, they don't have the right of use. And so even if they convert to industry or craft, they can't use the land they were used before, because the land belongs to the state, and they don't have the right to use agricultural land for another activity that in the industry. So the example of La Phu, we can see that here it's a map of different type of workshop and business inside the village. This village is 10,000 people population, specialized is in knitting and KO and all type of biscuit industry. So they've got two activities, they need a lot of land, and there is only this part which has been used by the workers. It was illegal, but they were forced. They forced the state to accept that they can use this land. But all those land are not used for this activity. And there was a project of Diem Công Nghiệp here, and 10 years after the expropriation of the population, the Diem Công Nghiệp is still not open. Because of the land is too expensive, there are corruption problem issue and large competition with the small enterprises. So this lack of investment for those industries which have invested a lot in mechanization, they can't get access to the land because of the competition over land with large projects. So it means that it is a political choice of urban management to give priority to major urban projects like Khu de Thi Mai, but it led to a social spatial segregation between Khu de Thi Mai project and the village. Here, you've got a village of one of the most famous village of lacquer for religious item, which is Sundom. And here is the village, and they are embedded in those Khu de Thi Mai, and there is no land for them to enlarge except this project, but the land is too expensive for most of the craft workers. So it's macroeconomic development versus microeconomic developments. So in conclusion, what is the future for the craft villages under rural governments? I just want to highlight 3 points. So we can see that there is equipment and services are not adapted to the need of those craft villages cluster, and also in the context of this region, which is very vulnerable to flooding. We are in a delta, and we see that a lot of ponds like that are more and more encroached or used only as sewage. So it's not sustainable at all. So the rural status of those craft villages is not adapted to manage these semi-urban entities, which are very highly productive settlement. And so they need a support for the expansion. The standards of governance are weak. There is no financial weak, and the institution don't follow because it's rural, it's not urban. And so finally, there is in this burgeoning in-situ urbanization, there is a risk of social and environmental risk, tension between migrants and locals, because migrants, most of them do the low cost or sometimes the highly dangerous activities, because most of the craft villages owners, they just want to work on their own, to have their workshop, but they don't work as workers in the businesses of others. So there is and also there is no means for inviting and for hosting this population. So it's also kind of society at 2 levels, which can lead to social issues. So thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Sylvie, for that highly illuminating and thought-provoking connection between the craft villages, the industrialization, and the process of urbanization. It was really, I thought, highly interesting. It's really made me look at things in a very different way. So what I would like to now is I would like to introduce our guests to further explore different aspects of the conversation with you. And I also please invite audience members to please drop your questions into the chat as they come to you. So now I would like to introduce Dr. Lee Kun-ti, who is the Deputy Head of Urban Planning Department at HUCE and the Chair of Urban Planning and Development Association at HUCE. So Dr. Lee Kun-ti graduated from Hanoi University of Civil Engineering and completed her PhD and Masters in Urban Planning at the University of Tokyo. She is currently holding the position of Deputy Head of Urban Planning Department and President of the Urban Planning and Development Branch of Hanoi University of Civil Engineering. Dr. Lee Kun-ti has recently conducted studies on the process of changing in the morphology and function of traditional peri-urban villages under the impact of globalization and urbanization, as well as sustainable livelihoods for the local people there. And I would also like to welcome Dr. Phat Vai Sun, who earned his PhD in Cities and Societies in 2010 at the National Institute of Applied Sciences of Lyon, INSA Lyon, France. And his research interests lie in urban planning, urbanization, urban resilience, livable city, public space and transit-oriented development, real estate market and housing. And he is also an urban development expert for the World Bank, UNDP and UN Habitat in Vietnam, is in charge of urban form topic for the Spatial Master Plan Adjustment project of Ho Chi Minh City. His PhD dissertation focused on urbanization of the alleyways of Hanoi with the topic Urban Morphology, Technical Services and Social Practices, case study of the narrow lane districts of Hanoi. So welcome to you both, and with Sylvie, it would be fascinating to hear your reflections and discussion.
Yes. Can you hear me? And first one, thank you, Ad Hoc, to organize a very interesting talk, and thank you, Sylvia, for a very interesting presentation. From my point of view, I think craft village plays a very important role because in consideration of a sustainable livelihood, as we know that we usually we think about what people will do after factories, because the factory people work in factory from 20 to 35 years old, and after 35 years old or 40 years old, what will happen to them? And then recently I found very interesting thing for the craft village, because we study a bamboo village, traditional bamboo village, and we found that after factory, people back to the traditional craft village and they can earn money. And the very interesting thing is that the older the local people are, so the more money they can earn, actually. So I think it's very interesting. And so from that point of view, I think craft village contribute to the sustainable livelihood for local people. Yes. Thank you, Sylvia, for the presentation. And I found brought pictures on the craft village in the Red River Delta. And I also want to share some of my experience on the craft village. I think that because the first keyword is about the diversity. You talk about the diversification of rural activities. Yes, I quite agree with that. And I think that the rate of the changing of the craft village also very different. I mean, for example, some craft village like Bát Tràng village or Duyên Thái village, Lacquer village, they have a good connection with the international market. So they develop very well. But some craft village that I visit, like Phù Lãng village, also ceramic village, and also some embroidery village like Quất Động village, which is not, Quất Động village is not far from Hanoi in the city, just I think 10 to 15 kilometers from the inner city. But I mean, like they are quite poor. They are quite poor because I asked the local people about the embroidery work, and they just can earn around 50,000 Vietnam dong per day to do the embroidery one day like this. So I think because Sylvia also talked about the ancient process of link between the countryside and the city. So in the case of some village like Phù Lãng pottery village or Quất Động embroidery village, I think the link was cut. The link was cut. Even it's very close to the inner city, but they cannot find the market, and that is the reason why the people facing the economic difficulty, and then the traditional occupation is I mean declining, is decreasing. So how to create a link? How to create a link between those traditional craft village and the city? Yeah, that is what I'm also thinking about. So and I also want to raise a discussion, and also I think that is a very important to think about, because when I read the Sylvie, I heard about the Sylvie FANCHETTE presentation. In 1,000 craft village, you have 40% is like a bamboo, right? And 20% is a textile and embroidery. for 20%, so totally 60%. But many of the bamboo village and embroidery village that I visit now, they like the traditional job is declining. So what should we do? How we can connect with Hanoi as a creative city? So that is my also my thinking. Yes. So I think that's the first. First, I think I would like to raise a discussion. And the secondary is when you talk about the chain of the architecture and the chains of the morphology. So I also I want to ask you about what factor do you think is influenced on the chains of the morphology? Is it something related to the distance to the Hanoi inner city, or is this something related to the Hanoi master plan? Hanoi master plan, because of the from my experience when I survey some village in the Hanoi urban fringe, because of the master plan, because of the security of land is because the land is not secure for the future, because it's going to change. So people, many villages, they will not do the traditional job, especially related to agriculture. So I want to discuss about what kind of factor do you think it influence on the morphology transformation of the village? The third one, it raised about the craft cluster. I actually am very interested in this one because of recently Hanoi has we call some formal legal document. It means that Hanoi want to divide the district into, we call something like a sub-district. And in each sub-district, Hanoi want to create the kind of hub. Because of Hanoi authorities, they think that if we create such hub, so it will help to develop the village surrounding. But when we work on such hub, we mostly think about the administrative boundary, like we cluster around 3 to 6 communes, and we choose a hub based on main route, on the important transportation route. But when I read the SYLVIE presentation, I'm thinking maybe we should think again, because the cluster of craft village and this kind of hub is not match. It's not match. So yeah, that is also very difficult to explain. But yeah, I want to discuss. Should we create hub based on the administrative boundary, or should we create the hub based on cluster of the village? Okay, so maybe later we can discuss. So I think it's very important, because it will influence on the way people do the planning for the suburban district from now on, because now we are working on this. So that if we can prove that the cluster of craft village plays the more important, so it means that people will need to change the way of approach. So that is my 3 points that I would like to discuss more. Yes.
So thank you very much, Chief, for very interesting question. So the first thing regarding Phulang, Bat Chang, and those villages we are we are not giving very high salary to the population. It means that we have two types. We have, I mean, we can say that we have three types of villages. We have got the very mechanized ones, industrial one, like paper, metal, plastic, textile, some of textile. You have the manual one, which are using a large range of population, part-time job like bamboo, rattan and bamboo, and embroidery. So it's mostly they are women, because the men, they go to find work in construction. And also they are temporaries, they are seasonal, so they don't give work all year long, because they are like seasonality or the production. Okay. And the third type of villages, of cluster villages, are the high value technique manual activities like objet d'art, ceramic, which I've got, okay, and which are really developed, where tourism can be developed. Okay.
Okay.
So if you compare Phulang and Bachan, it's a very interesting issue, because Phulang is a village of ceramists, we can say that, of artisan. Bachan, it's a village of traders. Okay, so they trade. Okay, they trade. They have got connection everywhere, and they have stolen the work of Phulang. It means that they are employing Phulang workers to work in Bachan and make Phulang type ceramic at, of course, a level less important price, and also because they are near Hanoi, and also it's a really touristical hub. Bachan, Phulang people, they are not traders. They, they are artisans. Some have gone to the fine arts. They don't have the sense of trade. Okay, and it's for that reason that they are more doing qualitative work, but no quantitative work. But they are swallowed by people. Okay. Okay, so that it's a big issue. It's the issue of trade and connection. Some artisans in Phulang are very good.
Yes.
Okay.
Like
Ngoc. He's very good. He has got connection everywhere, but he's individual. He's working individually because he is afraid of people to copy his work.
Right.
So he has get out from the system of cluster. So which means that link, connection, trade are very important. Sometimes more important than the quality of the work you do. Okay, that it's a big issue, because there are no labelization in Vietnam. There are no protection of know-how, of copy, of property right. There is no association which can protect you from people copying your work, and that it's a big problem. Quad done, it's embroidery, it's manual work. There is not a large market for that, so it means that those type of village could to develop, they should innovate, but they don't innovate. They just follow small work. So it's some of the craft villages who will perhaps disappear if they don't develop other activity like tourism or innovation. So I think it's not the link with the city which is important. Like before, it's a link with the trade, international trade, incentive, if you work with Japanese, you have done your study in Japanese. If, for example, there was a Japanese enterprise is very interesting by Quaddom work and who could help to innovate, perhaps it would be a good idea, but it's not especially Hanoi, which is important. Is where is the trade, where is the money? Bamboo is declining, of course, bamboo is declining because there is a big competition over land, over work between, for young people, between be a worker in industrial, in Hoc Talk, for example, in Funia, there is a big Hoc Talk which employ a lot of young people. The young people, they don't want to work for a very low salary, so there is competition over salary. And the Funia cluster of bamboo and rattan activity, you know, what they do, they go in Huabing to subcontract their work, and they have to train people in Huabing to do the job at a lower price. Okay, so you always try to find a lower price, and after the quality is declining, and after you lose your market, because the international market of bamboo and rattan, they want high quality work, but they are pressuring the cost of labor, so they are pressuring the salaries. So young people don't want to work. You know, it's like because there is no protection. There is no protection for their know-how. Regarding architecture change.
Can we discuss a little bit before talking about the morphology?
Okay,
because you talk about when you talk about Bachang and Fulang. Fulang is you say is addition one, and Bachang is the more trade one. Yeah, but because I kind of wonder, so which way is better for the pottery village, you know? Because I know that Bachang is too commercialization, and actually now, as I heard, even they import the product
from China.
Yeah, from China.
From China, Bachang type, low quality. You know,
yes.
I prefer that. I bought 10 years ago, but now I can't find that in Bachang, because they are the same type, but they are made in China. Because there is no control. You can't, if you have got a label made in Bachang, it must be made in Bachang, not in China. There is nobody to protect Bachang type. There is nobody to protect Fulang type. It's a big issue. I mean, craft will disappear from Vietnam if there is no protection and labelization. It's not possible. You know, there is at the administrative level, there is nobody to control that. Okay, sorry, but there is so many corruption, you can't, you know. Okay, and secondly, to labelize the products, you need professional association. It means an association of producers who say there is know-how is like that. What we say in French, cahier des charges. You have to follow a lot of rules, and the member of the association will sign that they will follow the rules, and they can use the label which can protect them. When you go to Van Phuc silk village, it's just, you know, silk from China. It's not silk. It's synthetic, you know, and it's made. It's written one FANCHETTE, Totam, Sunswept. It's not possible, you know. It will disappear. It will disappear. There is a strong need to protect.
Yeah,
but
I think
nobody wants to organize an association because everybody is in competition.
Oh, okay, thank you. And the second thing, I just want to add some information about the bamboo village, because of you know Dien Thai, right? You know Dien Thai. Yes. Dien Thai village is very interesting because some artists, they if you visit, you know the one famous artist. He stay in Duyên Thái, and then he creates something very creative. And also some people from Duyên Thái village, they go to the traditional bamboo village, and they combine the two process of lacquer and bamboo.
Lacquer and bamboo, yeah.
Yes, and they create a new product which can be exported to the international market. So I think also very interesting if people not only from the same cluster, but from different cluster, they can find a way to combine. So the value of the product can meet the international standard. And the one I know, he also export to Western market and very successful. So I think that's also interesting. And the last one, you talk about the embroidery and you talk about the tourism and innovation. And I think that innovation should be the first priority, because if people too much depend on tourism, it will not be sustainable. So it means the production, I think, still the core of the development. Yeah, something.
I can share with you an innovative project in Sundom Village. I mean, it's a religious lacquer and wood carving village. There was a project to diversify the production of products, not only religious item, but decorative item for Western market. But the only place where I found an association of producer was Sundom. And those people prevent this project to be, because they say that they are Buddhist. They receive the know-how from Buddha, and they don't want to diversify for decorative item. They get their know-how from their inspiration, for their religious inspiration. And so they push out the young fellow who wanted to develop this project with some NGO from USA. So it's not so easy on the social point to innovate and to change the way people are producing, because they have been producing like that for 1,000 years, and they are also very afraid of competition and people to steal their know-how and their name. So yes. I have to reply for your change in architecture.
Yes.
Architecture, I just want to speak about land issue. We know that according to the master plan, the agricultural land, the large field agricultural land, the rice field are expropriated for large projects, okay? And those projects has to be defined by the province.
Right.
At the level of the village, the only land which can be used by the villagers, it's what they call before the 10% land, which means that when you were expropriated from your rice, when you lost your right use on rice field, you could have the same amount, 10% of a land in the village to develop a new activity. But, and also there is the land we called vegetable land, which are the 5% of land which has done during the collective subvention era. But the problem is the state, it was, the provincial People's Committee of Hanoi forbade the villagers to use the land as they want, because they don't want this like informal process of construction. They want that the people get access to the land after the land have been built by donors. So they have to pay an amount to use the land. They have to pay more because for the infrastructure, and there are a lot of people who can't. Okay, so it's very difficult to get access to land. And it's for that reason that there are like a market, and the law have changed a lot, I think, for 10 years, and they are not the same in Bac Ninh and in Hanoi. So what we know that the amount of land for the villages is very low, is very scarce, and the master plan is just a plan. It has to be renegotiated every time. But the problem is the land which have been where there are infrastructure, I mean roads, and the land which has been, you can say, reclaimed for construction is too expensive for most of the villages.
Yes.
And sorry, there are a lot of corruption. And also there are a lot of people, when they get access to land for industry, they sell it. So there is kind of skyrocketing process of price. Even if a policy is good, we say there is a place for the people, they can have a land in Diem Con Nhep. After you see that people are making money, selling, buying, and after the land is too expensive. So that it's master plan or no master plan is the way. Regarding craft cluster, I think we have to think about the cluster and not the craft villages. The craft villages alone are, I mean, they don't have future, because we can see, I mean, according to our study, we have seen that most of the time there are 10 or 15 villages who are working on the same. And so there is this division of labor. So there is a space of production, and we have to take this space of production. If there is a policy to implement hubs,
yes,
we can't have a top-down policy. We say, here we are going to implement a hub. We are, sorry, we have to implement a bottom-up policy going from local to upscale. We have to go from what's the existing system and after to help, to support it. Not saying, here we are going to build a hub and people are going. You know, it has taken sometimes 1,000 years for the cluster to develop, okay? There are links, people, connection, network. You know?
Yes.
So,
yes,
you know, sorry, but it's bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, say, top down, we are going to do that. We know most of the cluster can't work. You can implement a cluster, a real industrial cluster with large industry. But to be the Silicon Valley is not given to everybody.
Yes,
so
yes, thank you.
It's a big problem. Local development can be done top down. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, I learned a lot. Thank you. Thank you. And now I'd like to invite Phat Tai Sun, if you'd like to also include your reflections.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you very much, Hanoi Ad Hoc and Urbanization to organize this very interesting event. And then thank you, SYLVIE, for sharing the very impressive presentation. I have to say that I learned a lot. It's quite a long time that I have not studied on the surrounding area of Hanoi and the rural area in the Red River Delta. And so I learned a lot. And then the first point that I want to not to raise, but to summarize that I see that from the data of the group, research group of SYLVIE, we can see that we have a very high number of the craft village in I mean that some selected province and city in the Delta, Red River Delta, right? 1,000 craft village. And then we have a cap some million of employment. I mean that depending to the activity of this craft. So we can see very clearly that this craft village have a very important role in terms of socio-economic development, but also it have a great potentiality for the preservation or the development of cultural or heritage aspect in the municipality that in the surrounding area of Hanoi. But I can say that still these craft village do not receive much attention from the research community. I say that I am happy to see that the research group of Dr. Chi from the Hanoi University of Civil Engineering already do something. But it's not enough. We have a very large scale of development, and we just some group of study is not enough. And also we can see that the lack of overall policy to manage or to govern the activity of this craft village. So because of this lack of attention, we can see that this craft village somehow have some spontaneous development, demonstrating throughout some following point. The first of all, we can see, I'm not sure that it is not a good news or bad news, but we can see have the very widespread construction or introduction of the somehow the how to from the urban area into the rural area of this craft business. And also we also have as I understand, a widespread construction of the small scale rent house for the immigrant to the village. That I consider that from a morphological point of view, it might be a negative aspect, but we can discuss, right? The second one is that we can see, because of the spontaneous development, we can see very that I'm not sure how to, but the introduction of the production side, that in between the different residential area of the village, and with a very high density of population and employment, we can see that it might have a negative aspect to the surrounding area of the production side of the village. That I think that it will be a big challenge. We can also have recognize the imbalance between the economic activity and ecological aspect and environmental aspect within this area. The imbalance between infrastructure development that SYLVIE point out very clearly, and also with a very high level of growing population and employment and immigrant, right? And the imbalance regarding the quality of life, I believe, between the different group of population, the land owner, the production owner, and also the immigrant worker. I think so. That can be also very critical point for future research, right? And also, last but not least, spontaneous points. I recognize that might be that SYLVIE point out that regarding the governance or the management aspect, we have somehow the spontaneous development. Spontaneous here is not really spontaneous. I can say that's semi-spontaneous. That we can have some cluster. We can have some specification regarding the different working step within. that the whole process of production of one product. But it seems that this cluster are not. That have a good governance or management mechanism to coordinate the different activities. Seem to be, to me, if I'm wrong, please correct me, that we need better institutional setting to coordinate the different activity within this cluster, right? So it is something that I recognize, and then based on this challenge and the summarizing point from the research from SYLVIE, I think that we have some following that challenge, but also that is our reflection. The first one is how to avoid the negative aspect to the surrounding environment of the production activity, right? And for example, in the large area, urban area, just like Hanoi, in city center of Hanoi, and in some other city center, we see that we have a very clear policy that not allowing anymore the activity, the small scale industrial activity. So how can we do from the policy perspective with such kind of industrial activity within this craft? I mean, that's this craft village. This is my first my first question that I think that it is a big challenge in the year to come. I mean, that in the next 10 years, 15 years, something like this, right? The second point is that I see that from my very immediate searching of the data, I see that we have a lot of employment, some million employment from the craft villa, but the revenue or the salary, I'm not sure that it is exactly the salary, but I can say that the revenue of the worker is still very limited compared with different other activity. I mean that from 5 to 7 million Vietnam dong per month, for example, or less, and it is lower compared with for example, working as a worker in large scale factory or some other commercial activity, or more precisely and very recently compare with the potential, I mean that revenue receiving from selling the production land to some kind of speculator or investor from Hanoi, from elsewhere, right? You might know that very recently, during the last mostly 6 months, they have property favor everywhere in Vietnam, especially in the surrounding area of Hanoi. I think that's all of you might know this. And what can be the big challenge of development from I mean that the influence of the property favor or the land favor to the development of the craft business? It is something that is, I think that it might be a continuation of discussion regarding the discussion of SYLVIE and Dr. Chi previously, right? How to balance between, I mean, that the potential big revenue from land market and the I mean that more challenging revenue from the production activity. Last but not least, challenges I think that we should raise for, I mean that perhaps future research direction is how to have I mean that a good model for governance and management or development control regarding this area. We can see that this area belongs to the rural area, so it will still have the governance regulation or legal framework of the rural area, but they have a very high level of population. In the European or Western standard, each kind of such village can be considered small scale city already, but they are working under the umbrella of rural area, right? So how to move forward with the governance? I mean that the right governance system with this kind of craft village, high density industrial activity, very low level of agricultural activity, but still very, I mean that under the umbrella of rural area management. I think that it might be something critical in the year to come for the craft village. There's a lot of detail regarding such kind of governance or management issue, right? And I think that we can discuss future. So it is some reflection from my side, and I'm happy if we can have a future discussion with SYLVIE and some other speaker and our West here, our participant here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sun, for a very interesting question. So yes, we know that environment is the biggest challenge. If you go to FANCHETTE or plastic village, you'll see that it's not possible to breathe. And life expectancy in FANCHETTE, paper village, is 10 years less than in other parts. So there is a price there is a price for industrial development according to the people. Environment, it means that issue of land. If you have a large space to settle your industry, you can develop easier your production, and you can store in a place and not mix, and people don't have to live in this place because of lack of space and the price of land. There is no place to build dormitory or to build housing for migrants or for workers, and sometimes for the family. So it's an issue of land, and the land is in the hand of the states. So I think that to merge the first question and the third one, I think that those type of space should have a status between rural and urban, because we know that urban is not a good status for them because the taxes are higher. You have to follow the code of production. You have to follow the code of construction. You have to pay a lot. I mean, the cost of production in cities is higher than in rural, and the governance is too tight. So in some countries, they find a balance between two. So perhaps a status of industrial area, I don't know, a special status with special policy, and also to protect this type of production space. If you look at the policy of the industrial policy of Vietnam, is only for in investment, foreign investment. We have seen during the COVID pandemic how Samsung has settled 2 big factories in Yanfeng, 100,000 workers. Can you imagine? You can look on Google Maps and you see from 2015 to 2020, the space of land, which has been very rapidly dedicated to foreign investors. If we could take 10% of this land to subsidize land for craft clusters, I think the level of the pollution will be lower, because the land is a big issue, it's very expensive. So people, they can't pressure the price of the land, so they pressure the use of labor and also of good machine or of energy. You have some, in the plastic village, sometimes people use plastic to burn, to get energy. They burn waste because the energy is too expensive. So land should be subsidized for those villages. Otherwise, if they are in competition with Hồ Đô Chimoy, Hồ Công Nghiệp, like that, they can't compete, and they will compete on the production cost. So it means on the environmental cost. So for me, it's very simple. You have to subsidize. Otherwise, you will lose them. And with the and now that I'm working on recycling, I know that recycling villages, paper, metal, and plastic, they are doing a good job for recovering and using all the waste produced by the city, but also by the industry. And they give a secondary material for Samsung and all. They buy at the price, at a smaller price. So we have to understand this, it's a system. We can't cut it in parts. Regarding the employment, if you compare the employment in a Hồ Công Nghiệp, as Mrs. Chi say, it's for the people, for the young people from 20 to 30. So it's not sustainable. You won't be able to build a worker society, in classe ouvrière, like we say in French, with people working only with very short-term and precarious contract. That is the policy of industry in Vietnam now, with a foreign investment. So perhaps we can find something between this policy, which is open to the foreign, the FDI, and the local industry. But the local industry don't have any support. There is support only for the registered enterprise in those craft villages. And a lot of craft village workers, craft workers, they don't want to formalize their enterprise because they will pay too much tax. Okay, so they prefer to be informal, and they, they produce like that. What you say, spontaneous. But what is spontaneity for a village who have done this work for 300 years or 1,000 years? It's not spontaneous. It's not because it's not produced by the state that is spontaneous. It's a long process, of social, economic integration. But they are not recognized because they are not modern. Okay, it's not the symbol of modernity. It's too local. So that it's a point of view, it's a political point of view. And the issue of land is in the hand of the government. The only thing I can say. If you let the speculation after, of course, you have seen there were a lot of silk village around Van Fook. They are all stopped. They were Laché, Fouché, all those villages. They were very highly skilled. Now they are only housing workers. They only built Nyacho for the young workers or students because they get more money by building bad quality Nyacho, taking 1 million rent for a room, than trying to produce silk. So that is the competition with the land, and real estate, it's a very fruitful economy. But, between open economy, control economy, perhaps there are some, it's political, I can't say that, unfortunately. Unfortunately, because Vietnam, I've got a strong background and a wonderful experience and a lot of, but we are losing. We are losing. And now you see in other countries, just for attracting tourists, you have got some big entrepreneurs who try to relocalize the production, near in Cambodia, you have got some very famous new silk village, and in Vietnam we have got that, but we are losing because of competition. Open door policy, competition.
When you talk about competition, it's international competition as well, right? And another reflection from my side is how many, that craft village or cluster having type industrialization of their commercial activity. Do you have any types of data and how we can move forward with this? Right? Open policy, but how to be open, right? How to assess? I think that it is another question that it is for future discussion or direction later, but it might be important, right?
There are not so many industrial craft villages because there are a lot of activities which can't be mechanized. Okay.
So
that's the issue, and so the only thing they can do is to innovate and to combine with tourism and others.
So because the international market have a very high level of requirement, and I don't think that only the manual production can fulfill the requirement, right? And so
Can I have one comment?
I'd just like to, because with our time constraints, I'd just like to interrupt and include a question that we have from the audience. So we have a question here. I'll read it because I don't know if you've had a chance, because you've been so involved in your discussion, which has been fascinating to tease out the issues. But from Phat Huong, we have said the process of urbanisation of craft villages. These are no longer agricultural villages. They are urban areas still called villages. So while the villages around Hanoi were urbanised by an administrative decision, these craft villages were urbanising themselves. However, the question is, how is planning for these villages and towns taken care of, which I think you've been discussing. However, how has the planning of traffic, housing, public space, production, collection and treatment been conducted? And these craft villages are associated with environmental pollution, while industrial zones are controlled for pollution. How have these craft villages been controlled for pollution? And the question is, how is the role of the craft village production development planning associated with environmental pollution management? And then here, there is an ongoing conflict over land, as Sylvie said. There is a conflict between the transfer of land to new urban areas and the allocation of land for the development of the urban village of trade itself. What are the rights of the local people to have the urban village space to maintain the traditional craft? And the question of how to plan in this conflict situation, and how are local people involved in this planning process? So over to you, Sylvie and Sun and Chi, and just your final kind of thoughts on these issues that have been raised.
So that it would take another talk to discuss all that. But what I want to say that craft villages don't have the monopoly of pollution. I just want to share one experience I had when I went to Phu Nha, Hoc Talk. Phu Nha, it's in this cluster of it's on the National 6, southwest of Hanoi, and there is a wonderful place, a plant to clean the water, the used water. And so when you are a visitor, they show you how extraordinary is the system to clean the industrial water. And when you leave, they stop it because they say that all the factories in the Hoc Talk, they don't want to pay all the fees to maintain that. So there is no ambiguity. Hoc Talk are also big polluter, and it's for that reason that the Hoc Talk are in the countryside, because they can pollute as much as they want. There is no control, like in city. The industrialization in Hoc Talk is in the countryside, not in the city, because the land is less expensive and it's easier to pollute. So that is just one point. And all those, I let my colleagues, because it's very long, and we have answered a bit to these issues Mrs. Huang has raised.
Thank you very much. So I would really like to thank you and say how much I appreciate, and on behalf of Hanoi Ad Hoc, all the contributions, the insights, and obviously the wealth and depth of research from Sylvie, Sun and Chi. It's been really a privilege to listen to your viewpoints and your research and knowledge in this area tonight. Also, I'd like to give a big thank you to Dr. Sylvie FANCHETTE, Dr. Lee Kun Chi, and Dr. Phat Vai Sun. So thank you very much, and greatly appreciated for your time and your knowledge shared with us this evening. And I would also like to invite any audience members, if you are interested in the work that Hanoi Ad Hoc is doing, please reach out to us, because we're always looking for energetic people who want to volunteer and are interested in preserving the architectural memory of Hanoi. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for your time this evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.